Right, so the US are now apparently so desperate in trying to rein in Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's continued attempts to expand its war, and so fearful of what escalation with Iran could quite rightly lead to, but also still so pathetically unable to just cut the arms supply off to Israel, that they are now literally paying them to not strike Iran where it would hurt most. The US have now resorted to bribing Israel, it seems, to calm down. They're literally offering to compensate Israel for the harm caused by Iran to them. It's like the spoilt brat is demanding attention and kicking off with bad behaviour, and the US comes in and instead of laying down the law, gives them a chocolate bar instead to just keep quiet. Will it work? Probably not. Is it really pitiful at how absolutely unwilling or unable the US is to do what needs to be done? Of course it is. But aside from anything else, you need leaders prepared to do that. And the US has anything but. And you might not have heard half of it on that score either. Right, so the US are now offering to compensate Israel if it agrees to not hit certain targets in Iran upon their inevitable, as it seems to be, response to the Iranian retaliation last Tuesday, which targeted 3 military targets, chiefly news emerging that actually Iran did a lot more damage than Israel have claimed. Satellite imagery has got the internet chattering despite Israeli denials of the 180 miles Iran fired, for example. Some 32 of them apparently did hit the Nevatim airbase, which is home to Israel's precious F-35 jets. That's the estimate as told according to analysis by Professor Jeffrey Lewis at the Middlesbrough Institute for International Studies anyway. But despite that strike itself being a retaliation for the attacks committed by Israel, notably the assassination they carried out of former Gaza Prime Minister and head negotiator for Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, in Tehran back in July, Israel, of course, are affronted anyone would dare attack them, even if they struck first. So another potshot at Iran does seem very likely. If Israel will agree not to go after certain targets, they have not been mentioned, but I would imagine anything nuclear would be a good start, then the US will compensate them by doing pretty much what they have been doing for Israel in large doses all along, certainly over the last year, as we arrive at October 7th again this year, passing that 1-year mark since the Hamas operation in Israel, which has led to the utterly depraved and disproportionate response that is still ongoing, being committed by Israel. War crimes and genocide being committed by Israel a year on, and still with no end in sight, only expansion and even more warfare. The US offer to Israel is a package of more diplomatic protection, of course, and of course yet more weaponry. Make it make sense. All the US is doing is making itself even more complicit, and it just won't stop doing it. The news of this deal was broadcast by Israeli TV network Kan 11, but here's an excerpt from the Palestinian Quds News Network who covered it. The United States has reportedly proposed a compensation package to Israel if it refrains from striking specific targets in Iran, according to a report by Israel's Kan 11. The offer comes amid heightened tensions following retaliatory missile strikes on Israel, during which over 200 missiles were launched, leaving casualties and severe damage. According to Amichai Stein, US officials presented the compensation deal during ongoing negotiations between Washington and Tel Aviv regarding Israel's response to the missile attack. The proposed package is said to include comprehensive diplomatic protection and a weapons deal, on the condition that Israel refrain from hitting certain Iranian targets. An American official, quoted in the report, summarized the offer. If you don't hit targets A, B, and C, we will provide you with diplomatic protection and an arms package. Details of the targets remain classified. Israeli officials reportedly acknowledged the US proposal, but emphasized their commitment to national security. We consider the United States and listen to them, but we will do everything to protect our citizens and the security of the State of Israel, Israeli representatives responded. The report comes as top US military officials, including CENTCOM Chief General Michael Kurilla, are in Israel for ongoing discussions about potential Israeli attack. So the idea that Israel might strike Iranian nuclear sites, the obvious target the US would not want Israel to go after, in my view, is clearly one the US think Israel would actually do. But instead of pledging a withdrawal of arms, such as France is now considering doing, though if Emmanuel Macron wants props after a year of arming Israel, it's a little bit late for that sunshine, but the move would still be welcome. The US are just doubling down again, trying to placate Israel rather than just strip them of the means to commit further atrocity. It is just so frustratingly maddening that such is the leadership of the US, such is the position ongoing of genocide Joe Biden and Antony Blinken. But where Biden's mind is arguably too addled to consider any kind of change of position, it doesn't help when he has a living, breathing version of Grimer Wormtongue hanging out next to him in the form of dual US-Israeli citizen Antony Blinken. And I use that analogy deliberately because, frankly, the stuff that has come out about Blinken recently really ought to have finished him by now. Any final moments of a ceasefire debate, and all of a sudden Blinken is always there, isn't he? It's been as if his appearance on the scene has been a herald of the talks failing. He has been more than anyone Israel's most ardent supporter in the US, and the depths he's been prepared to stoop to have even included, as Quds News Network have also reported on this week, included the authorization, apparently, of strikes on humanitarian aid trucks. In a shocking revelation reported by DropSite News, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken reportedly approved the policy allowing Israel to bomb humanitarian aid trucks entering Gaza, according to statements made by Israeli cabinet members. This adds a new dimension to the infamous humanitarian blockade of Gaza that has intensified since Israel's military actions began in October 2023. From the onset of the Israeli offensive, Blinken took a hands-on approach to US policy in the region. After the October 7th resistance operation, he was the first senior US official to visit the occupation state, arriving in Israel on October 11th. Speaking before his departure, Blinken declared, "I'm going with a very simple and clear message, that the United States has Israel's back." The agreed-upon plan here between the US and Israel was to allow aid into Gaza, but the aid must not reach Hamas, was the condition. Otherwise, all bets were off, and they would be targeted by Israel. This was a demand insisted upon by Israel's hard-right finance minister Bezalel Smotrich, apparently. The trouble is, to Israel, everything has been Hamas, hasn't it? Also, if this was a signed-off-on joint plan and was above board, why, when aid convoys have been hit, have Israel admitted to a mistake happening or apologised for it, and Blinken provided diplomatic cover? They know the optics. They know what they are doing is a violation of international humanitarian law. They know they'll be castigated for it. Yet they did it anyway. Yesterday, again, the claim was made that they'd found another Hamas base in northern Gaza, which saw a school and a mosque destroyed. Not military targets. Neither are aid convoys, but they were targeted anyway, and it seems were done so with the assent of the US. Israel will therefore point to any aid getting in anywhere as being delivered to Hamas and just destroy it. And we've seen numerous examples of humanitarian aid trucks being targeted after all. Blinken was apparently told by Netanyahu himself that some of his cabinet members, and you can imagine this being the likes of Smotrich or Ben-Gvir being the ones alluded to here, that they didn't want so much as an aspirin pill to enter Gaza. The US encouraging awful acts of atrocity, seemingly coming from pretty much the top of the Biden administration, as this story alleges, has been encouraging Israel, and now that it isn't a subjugated, occupied population of the last 57 years that is being targeted, but instead a powerful, possibly nuclear nation like Iran, the US have to resort to bribery and corruption, it seems, to rein Israel back in again. You can't keep letting them off the leash against the weakest, just to try and put the choker chain back on them later when they pick on someone bigger than you're comfortable with. And such is the ongoing, utterly unhelpful role the US continues to play in the Middle East. It remains to be seen if bribery works, however, when Israel's response to Iran inevitably comes. I think it is inevitable another Israeli strike will happen, not a retaliation as it will be called by Western media, but another attack, having been the ones who instigated the exchange of fire with Iran to begin with attacks on Iranian soil, their embassy in Syria, and in their own capital of Tehran, both strikes by Iran being responses to those. Is Israel going to carry on, and if so, how much will Iran escalate next time? Well, Iran might have some help on that matter as it happens now, since it is now being reported that Russia is joining them against Israel if needs be. Russia actually not having a lot of choice in the matter as it happens. Get the details of how Putin is getting roped in and why in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.